Hi, this is Alessio. Hope you're well, and welcome to this update on Bitcoin. Now, before we talk about Bitcoin, and before we discuss what these charts potentially mean, including this chart of Litecoin, let me just show you quickly some of the other cryptos very quickly. For example, Ethereum, massive drop down. You can see here, Ethereum has already started this drop down to the 100 averages. XRP, Ripple, wow, look at this carnage, absolute carnage in XRP here, coming back down to the previous support levels. Again, another example of false breakouts you can see here. Dash, yep, pretty much Dash. Dash had a massive drop, as you can see here. Dash had to drop down, massive spike lower, as you can see there. And ADA, Cardano, also very similar, massive drops in Cardano here as well. Now, before we talk about Bitcoin, let me just show you quickly this chart of Litecoin. Now, I showed you this chart before in a previous video, and I just love, I got to tell you, I absolutely love this chart because it's a beautiful example of how time projection, in other words, time resistance, usually acts on the price. As you can see here, and I mentioned this in a previous video, we had time resistance, like a wall of time resistance, giving us advanced warning of a potential inflection point on Litecoin. And as I mentioned before, Litecoin seems to be often a leading indicator for Bitcoin. If you haven't seen my previous video about how Litecoin can often be a leading indicator for Bitcoin, go ahead and watch it. So I showed you several examples of how Litecoin in the past has usually been a leading indicator for the Bitcoin market. And as you can see, after Litecoin hit time resistance, as shown to us by this, what I call a time machine indicator or the time projection indicator, Litecoin actually began to drop and show tremendous signs of weakness, as you can see here. And this was an early indication, a leading indication that also Bitcoin could potentially drop as well. And that's pretty much what happened. Bitcoin also started dropping pretty much soon after. And again, as we can see here, Bitcoin has now come back and retested the previous lows it made back in July. And by the way, this is a scenario I mentioned in a previous video. You may recall in my previous video, Bitcoin's most likely next move. I showed you two potential scenarios. Here's the first scenario. The first one was that we could potentially retest the previous lows we made in early July, followed by a move towards the 100 moving average, or potentially some consolidation. Some consolidation going sideways like this, maybe a triangular formation, and then finally making a move towards the orange line, the 100 moving average. And that, I think, is what potentially is happening here at the moment. Given the fact that Bitcoin could not get anything going below the July lows, you can see it kind of stopped here around about this level here. It kind of paused and bounced off this level, which seems to indicate we might begin to see some sort of consolidation. In other words, what could be happening is something we've seen in previous times after parabolic moves. Something like a consolidation, like so, like a sort of a triangular formation, and then followed by a move towards the 100 moving averages. For example, the 100 EMA and the 100 SMA, as you can see here. Now, the consolidation might be quite short, or it might be quite a long while. We'll have to wait and see about that. But bottom line is that the more likely scenario for me is that as long as, again, I want to mention this, as long as Bitcoin remains below the July highs, in other words, below the 13,250 level, the most likely scenario is a move towards the 100 moving average or a potential move towards the 21 weekly moving average. As you can see, it is the weekly chart of Bitcoin. And again, I'm not expecting any fresh new highs anytime soon. So I think the less likely scenario is for Bitcoin to start making a move quickly higher above the previous highs it made near 14,000. I think the more likely scenario is this, that as long as, again, as long as we remain below 13,250, the more likely scenario is a move towards the weekly 21 moving average, this blue line that we see here, the weekly 21 average, which again is a level that the markets come to test over and over again, even in a bull market, especially in a bull market. By the way, let me just say this. The only people right now who get angry anytime I say Bitcoin is going to make a drop or a correction towards the weekly averages are the people who essentially bought. In other words, the FOMO crowd. In other words, the people who bought near the 13,000 or 12,000 levels. Because, and it's quite funny, in my last video when I mentioned that Bitcoin could potentially drop down to test the previous lows, I got some angry comments from some of these people saying, oh, how dare Alessio say that Bitcoin is going to drop or make a correction. Let me say this. Again, these are the kinds of people who base their decisions not on logic and reason, but on emotion. Again, these are the FOMO crowd who bought near these 13,000 parabolic highs. And now that Bitcoin has dropped, they're angry, they're bitter, And, you know, as soon as something like this happens, you know, they go through the 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, and all that kind of stuff. So the bottom line is, here's what those people don't understand. And I know the majority of people who watch my videos here are sophisticated, intelligent people. So I'm not saying that you're thinking this. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of people out there who are not very intelligent. They're basically making decisions on emotion. And basically, these people have forgotten that markets don't move up in a straight line. You know, they move up, and what they do, they have a correction. They have a pullback, for example, to the 21 weekly average or the 100 daily moving average. And then they usually hold these levels. If it's an uptrend, if it's a bull market or an uptrend, then usually they hold this support level and they start to move higher again, continuing the uptrend higher. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen on Bitcoin. We'll have to wait and see. But again, that is what usually happens in an uptrend or in a bull market. Markets go up, they pull back to the averages, to the 21 weekly average, and they move back up again, continuing the uptrend, and so on and so on. That's nothing to get angry about. It's nothing to be upset about. That's just the way things are. It's called reversion to the mean. Again, that's the key phrase, reversion to the mean. We saw it happening many times in the 2017 bull market, as you can see here. Bitcoin went up, pulled back to the 21 average, went up again. As you can see, went to the 21 moving average, went back up again. Went to the 21 moving average, and went back up again, continuing the uptrend. That's what happens in a healthy bull market. So we'll have to wait and see what happens here on Bitcoin. For the moment, again, as I mentioned before, as long as Bitcoin remains below this level of resistance, the more likely scenario is a move potentially down to the 100 moving averages that we're seeing here. It's probably consolidating here for a while and then making its move. And then we'll see how Bitcoin reacts to these levels, to the 100 key moving averages. Will it hold them or will it break below them? All right, guys. And by the way, keep an eye on what happens to Litecoin here. Because Litecoin, again, as I mentioned before, is a very important and potentially very interesting leading indicator for Bitcoin. If you haven't seen my previous video on that, then go ahead and watch it. I'll put it for you at the end so you can go ahead and watch that video on the leading indicator for Bitcoin. By the way, one common question I often get is, why don't I cover other cryptos like Ethereum, XRP, and Litecoin, for example? The fact is we do cover them in our member videos. For example, yesterday, my good friend Zach Muir posted his crypto report for our members, covering those specific cryptos and also Bitcoin as well. So to watch our member videos where we cover not just Bitcoin, but also the other cryptos like Litecoin, Ethereum, and XRP, feel free to become a member today on this link you see here, which also gives you 3 months extra free. This link and offer will be there until Sunday. And guys, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video update. Bye for now.